Alrighty, a la Zach Galifianakis' Between Two Ferns, I present Between Two Maple Trees. Special inaugural guest, Ian Boswell, is on the show. Now, Ian, it feels like just about 6 months ago that you were on Katusha thinking about what you were going to be doing next. And in reality, I want to say that was about 2019. Is that correct? Is that your last year on Katusha?
Yeah, which is a long time ago now.
Yeah. Time flies. So then you go on to win Unbound in 2021. You host a podcast, and suddenly you are crowned an elder statesman of gravel. So this is a topic that you and I will chat about regularly. We'll sort of riff on it either while being recorded or just live on a bike ride. Let's start with the state of the gravel union. How is
the state of the gravel union?
How is gravel right now? Wide open question. How is gravel right now in your opinion?
I've thought about this a lot since I guess we last spoke about this. The sport has changed tremendously since I started, I guess, doing it. I mean, I guess I kind of started doing gravel in 2020, but there was no events. So 2021, I guess, was the first year I started going to gravel events. I see a huge shift. I mean, a lot of that is just growth. You know, you look at Unbound this year, or you look at, any event, there's international, participants, you have more media attention, there's, more athletes, it's way more competitive. So it's grown a lot. During the last, I guess, 3-4 years now, I've seen that it's become more professionalized, I guess I would say. I mean, I know people in the World Tour still complain that pro cycling is not a professional sport or it's not professional enough. But gravel has professionalized, it's become more organized, a little bit more, I guess, kind of clear cut as to like the direction which the sport is going. And I say this, is it happening at the front? I've had the opportunity, I guess the last event I did was Oregon Trail, a 5-day race out in Oregon. And I was just there riding. And I guess the events that I have upcoming here in the next month, Big Red, SBT, Vermont Overland, I'll kind of participate in that same manner, like just going and riding it. And I feel like the separation of the people at the front and the people who are kind of maybe, participating the same way that they did, in 2008 or, 2010, 2015, like that hasn't changed all that much. But I do just feel like there's more people who are racing and the sport as a whole is getting faster and more competitive. I also realized that my realization has been that the sport has changed, but so has my perspective of it as well. Mm-hmm. Or I guess how I view it as part of my life.
Yeah. Good to constantly keep tabs on one's perspective. I think this year in particular, 2024 was certainly the biggest influx of international racers. I mean, we have Mate Mohoric, right? I mean, one of the World Tour's greatest riders, Greg Avermaet. When I say greatest, I mean current contemporary riders, winning stages of all 3 Grand Tours. Greg Van Avermaet, gold medalist in the Olympics. You still, to a degree, have your foot in the door in Europe. You were talking about offline earlier, you're invited back to a contemporaries retirement party. Are you catching wind of Europeans interested in it, or is it just sort of observational that these guys are showing up at North American races?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely more people interested. I think, Roman Bardet said he wants to do gravel next year. And, obviously with the Bahrain team and Mohoric coming over this year, and I stayed in the same house as Daniel Oss this year for Unbound, which is cool. I mean, that's exactly what you and I did is, we left one form of cycling and joined another. Mm-hmm. I think what's changed, though, is sometimes that mindset. One thing that was very apparent to me at Oregon Trail, I would rank it up there in like the top 3 or 4 coolest events I've done on a bike, with the ride I did in Chile, the Tour de France, Oregon Trail, and the Migration Gravel Race. Both, some of those were races, some of those were just rides. There was a large European contingent there. On the last morning we were camping. I was like, this is an awesome bike event. 5 days of riding bikes through remote Oregon, camping. Food's provided. You don't have to carry anything. And I asked them, like, hey, how are you guys? You enjoying this? And they're like, oh, this is horrible. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, well, I'm not doing as well as I want. I'm like, whoa. This is all like, it was kind of a realization that like a lot of people are coming to this now with a performance goal in mind.
Right.
And I feel like I've, throughout my gravel career, I've, had great performances, but always with the under kind of line theme of the performance is because it's fun. It's like I've enjoyed, when you and I were in the front group in Unbound in 2021, like that was really fun. Like, I don't think we were like, oh, I got to beat Ted. It was more like, this is sweet. We're in like a group of 5 people and it was a great time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it's a little bit sad to me when I see people come to these, someone comes from Europe to Unbound, or someone goes to Migration Gravel Race, or comes to Oregon Trail, whether they're international or they're, local, and they can't like make that switch of like, okay, well, I'm maybe not in the front this day or this race, but like you're still doing something really cool, and like oftentimes in a really fun place, and there's people around you who are, enjoying it. So that's one thing I've definitely kind of had my finger on the pulse of, is like, how do we just continue to make sure that people enjoy this? And I think that there's a lot of kind of back to your question, world tour riders who see the fun side of it and are coming to it because they're like, cool, I can still be competitive. I'm still fast. I still like to ride my bike. But I can do that and kind of sprinkle in a sense of, fun as well. I saw Van Avermaet at the end of Unbound. I guess this was 5 or 6 hours after he finished, walking around the expo, drinking a beer. He clearly cared about the race and did as well as he, was trying to win it. But, 5 hours later could kind of hang out afterwards and, take his foot off the gas and be a participant as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the sport that I stepped into, and it wasn't even in 2016, it was probably 2017, 18, 19 that I was really starting to do gravel, if you will. And then you stepped into it in sort of a pre-pandemic, midst of pandemic. And then just how quickly the sport has changed. So it's a different sport that Daniel Oss is stepping into, or Roman Bardet is stepping into, and they almost don't see, they weren't able to experience something it's funny because it is so recent, but it's almost the inevitability of athletics, of sports, of human nature is to try to perform. So yeah, I mean, as elder statesmen at this point, it's almost, I remember talking to Jeff Kabush about it and Rebecca Rush and having the conversation of like, how can we take the things that we love and allow them to continue? So with that said, I mean, what is, in your mind in gravel, what is beating a dead horse at this point? What is old news? What is something that we just got to be like, all right. I mean, is it the seriousness? Is it that the spirit of gravel is dead and we just need to adopt that the spirit of gravel is what it is?
I mean, I think if you look in the right spot, it's there.
Yeah.
And I think it's totally, I think the spirit of gravel is like a mindset. Even at Oregon Trail, I was riding with Alex Howes one day, who, most days he was there racing, but one day he just wasn't feeling good. And like, we just rode together for 4.5 hours. And at the bottom of the hill, some guy had crashed and we stopped and like, waited for him for, 45 minutes until a motorcycle came to help him. And it was cool to see someone like Alex. I mean, he's kind of in a similar situation to us. But that can both race, but then also see the other side of it. And like, hey, it was still a fun day. And we, went and swam and went fishing later in the day. But that said, like when I look back to when I was, 21, 22, like, when you're focused on just racing, like you do, when you invest a lot of time and energy into the sport for performance, like you want to get something out of it. And like, it sucks to train hard for something and not do well. But I think the beating of the dead horse would be that, like, keeping perspective of it is like, it's still, we do so many cool events all over the place. I've been following your trip along out west, and it's like, oh, cool. That's like, these are events that I've heard of, the Last Best Ride, but this Nimiwakit or I don't know.
Yeah, the Nepomuk Gnarly.
Nepomuk Gnarly.
Minuscule.
Yeah, but it's cool to see like the different. I'm sure you had a completely different experience there, and like just hearing how small of a town this is, but yet how big of an event it is.
Totally.
I think that's still the beauty of gravel, and I think there still is like a spirit of kind of what the sport initially embodied, of people coming together and riding bikes. And sometimes you just have to go a little bit further back in the results sheet or in the peloton to now find that sense of kind of, I don't say community because there is a community at the front, but maybe the people who are there just to, ride it for pure enjoyment and not for speed and time.
So if we represent the entire gravel peloton in any particular race as a pyramid, we're often talking about the pointy end of the race, the very tip top. I mean, it is in reality the smallest portion of people racing, hell-bent racing, as opposed to participating in riding. How do you choose an event that you're going to race versus going to ride?
That's actually a good question. I mean, I think part of it is events that are, I mean, I guess in the past couple of years, like I've, Unbound is like a big event. Like that's kind of like the marquee gravel event on the calendar. It's like the one that, it's also so long. Like that would be a kind of miserable event to just go ride. I think for myself, like if I could do it in 10 hours, I want to get it done. I don't want to be out there for 18 hours. So I try to get like fit enough to be competitive in that event. So that kind of means like all the events running up into that, like, yeah, you're trying to like race at the front to get, just to get fitness and to kind of, see where you're at. And in the last couple of years, I've kind of the tail end of the season is when I've been able to like go to some, a number of events and just enjoy. There's no real rhyme or reason. There's also just I think a lot of it is distance, like the events that are 100 plus miles, that's a long time to cruise. As much as I love riding my bike, I don't want to make something take longer than it needs to. And I kind of feel like 100 miles is kind of like the mile mark of beyond that is, you want to push on a little bit because you want to get done before sunset. If it's less than that, you can kind of ride and enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah, the irony is you're trying to perform at arguably the longest race that you're going to do all year. I mean, you can not fake fitness, but it's much easier to put in the training for a 50 to 100 mile race than the ones that are 100 or 2x that.
I need to figure that out for next year because you and I did a ride, and I think it was like early February. We did like a 100-mile ride in Vermont. And it was a nice day in the Northeast Kingdom. It was like 32 degrees and not snowing or raining. I was like, wow, and this was February, and here we are in like August, and I'm like, oh man, I just did a 3-hour. I'm like, I always like burn all these matches of like motivation to ride when the weather's at its worst, and then by the time it's like today's Bluebird day, it's like the temperature's finally cooled off. It's like 75 degrees, sunny. And I'm like, okay, 3 hours is plenty. I'm like, I couldn't imagine going to do a 6-hour training ride today. But part of that also just coincides with, the obligations of, summertime. Like, I want to spend more time, the days are longer so we can go camping and, and Vermont, also the, everything in the yard starts to grow. So there's just more home projects. Seems like it's springtime and, February, March, it's like nothing's really happening, outside of skiing. The ground is still frozen, so nothing grows.
Right. Yeah. It's like the front walk is shoveled.
Yep.
It's either ride the trainer or go skiing.
Yeah.
So going back to what is old news at this point, you work in the industry. You are a smart character. What's new? Is it Aero armbands? Is it the nose guard a la Dylan Groenewegen? Like what's coming up?
What is new? What is coming? I mean, I think aerodynamics have come a long way. Actually, just as before we recorded this, I was watching the team pursuit, which is insane at the Olympics, the speeds in which they're going. Yeah. And I think it's just, aerodynamics play into everything. And I think, nutrition has like changed so much. I was just speaking to, I forget who, like last week, and they were asking me about I spoke to someone in Australia where they were doing like a report for the UCI of like nutrition guidance for athletes. And they were trying to get like a sense of like, what do people do in long gravel events for nutrition? Yeah. And I think, yes, aerodynamics and equipment plays a huge part, but I think nutrition plays a way bigger part, I guess, especially for me. I remember, and maybe we've talked about this in 15 and 16, I did the Vuelta with Team Sky, and Chris Froome was there both times. And we were like starting Grand Tour stages with water in our bottles and like a little squirt of lemon juice for like flavor, like no carbohydrates in the bottle. And like after an hour, I would take like one rice cake, which was, 20 grams of carbs. And then maybe, a little bit after that, I would take a gel or something. And, I did a 3-hour ride today, and I had, 4 UnTapped gels and 2 waffles plus bottles with mix. Like, and that was just a 3-hour ride. It's just like for me to think back to those days of this whole low carb fad and pro cycling. I'm like, what the heck were we thinking? Like, there's no wonder where you had days when you just felt terrible. Compared to now, it's like people fuel up for every ride. And you look at, the longer stuff, especially it's, the nutrition starts days in advance versus like just thinking about it on race morning or once the gun's gone off.
Yeah. Yeah, nutrition is definitely one of these that I wanted to talk about. I love let's call it past 20 years max, but even less than that, it's probably past dozen years that we went from like the 60 grams of carbs per hour. Then when there was a time that we were operating in keto, like no carbs, and now we're all of a sudden at this 150 plus grams of carbs per hour. So I lived in the World Tour prehistoric age. We were in the 60-ish. If Where do you land on this adoption of high carbs? I mean, like you said, you have gels and waffles. Are you training yourself to have a heck of a lot of carbs, or is it just like, I'm going to eat more often when I'm hungry?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, my diet off the bike is just like I just eat kind of what I want when I want now. Obviously, if I have like a big ride coming up or a race, like, cool, I should like make sure that I'm, eating an extra serving of rice or pasta or whatever, bread. My wife's a good baker, so that helps.
That helps a lot.
But on the bike, yeah, thankfully it's most nutrition products, like, you think about a gel's what, 21 grams, of UnTapped gels, 21 grams. Like, it's pretty easy to be like, cool, I'll take, 3-4 gels an hour. Like, it's pretty easy to like dose it out. But it is a job. I think a lot of people don't realize like how much you actually need to eat for longer events, and that's where it's great, to just like fill up bottles with, to put some Maplate in a bottle, because you don't even have to think you're gonna get thirsty. So like drinking carbohydrates is such an easy form of getting them in your system.
Yeah.
Sometimes gels and stuff are the things that are, I enjoy eating. So having something like waffles is like great because I like chewing things. But you have to like strategically think like, cool, I'm gonna have a downhill here. I can, take my hands off the bar, reach into my pocket, grab something.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, in the big events, it's like trying to just eat as much as I can, really. It's like, I mean, you know what it's like. It's like every 10 to 15 minutes, you're putting something in your mouth, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It is crazy the age in which we are consuming them. Carbohydrates, gels, energy. It's funny you say that you treat it like a job, and I'm really glad you say that, because have you gotten to the point that you have created a spreadsheet? I've embarrassed to admit, but I'm glad you say it's a job, because it's like, okay, this is a 5-hour race. I'm going to consume this many bottles, this many gels, and it's very formulaic. Have you gotten to that point?
I haven't. I probably should. And I think your question before was kind of like, how do I, for most rides, like, today I went out and did 3 hours. I kind of just like, I take some food, I throw it in my pocket. I know if like worst case scenario, I can stop at a gas station or general store and grab something.
Perfect.
There are a couple of rides, I'll do a couple long rides before Unbound, or just, races where like, okay, this is like a specific day. And it's like every time I have one of these events or rides, like the night before, or like the morning of, I'm like, on my bed, if I'm in a hotel, just like have like nutrition just all over the bed, trying to calculate like, okay, this is 20 grams. Okay, this is 40 grams. Okay, if I put this in my bottle, and I should make a spreadsheet, because like every time I'm probably ending up at the same place, but like counting everything every time, versus like just having a spreadsheet and then it's like, sweet, I need, this many gels, this much drink mix, this many waffles. That would make it so much easier than every single time trying to go through, my little nutrition bag that I carry with me of, products to races.
Yeah. So you going back in time a little bit, you mentioned the couple drops of lemon juice in your water bottle back in a Froome era. I think did you overlap with Wigo at one point?
I did, yeah, for 2013, 14, and maybe 15. I think he raced up through the spring. Yeah.
So Sky at that point, it was thought of, was really pushing nutrition. And I remember being envious of the teams that had full-time chefs seemingly all the time. And I think Sky was one of those programs. What were the things that were pushing the envelope? Or even like, was it considered pushing the envelope to only have lemon juice?
I mean, I think it was a weird phase, because looking back on it, it was like probably like, and like how much of it was a placebo effect of like, we thought that because we had a chef there and we had a nutritionist, like we thought we were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of weird things. I don't say weird, but just actually in hindsight, stupid things going on. Like this whole, the low carb training that we did. And then you become so accustomed to that you just do it in the, flat stage and, the Vuelta. You're like, cool, it's a flat stage. It's not going to be that hard. I'll just, have an omelet and like kind of a low carb breakfast. It's like, that's so stupid.
Stay lean.
Yeah. So there was that side of it. There was also and I think some people still do this, but there's kind of the low residue diet, which Wiggins was really big into. So like leading up to a Grand Tour and through a Grand Tour, he would have like almost no fiber, just to be lighter, I guess, from just accumulation of, stuff in your gut.
Fibrous foods. Yeah.
I've never tried it, but from what I've heard, like it does take a couple days to actually get used to it. Because I mean, as you know, it's nice to wake up the morning of an event and use the bathroom before you start.
Well said.
So that was just, rice and, chicken breast or omelets, like pretty low fiber.
Yeah.
And then Froome, for some reason, like really did not like sodium. So before mountain stages and Grand Tours, like the chef wouldn't salt the food. There'd be salt on the table so you could then salt it afterwards.
Yeah.
But I do a fair bit of cooking. Like everything I cook, like salt. Like even if it's like a sweet thing, like I'm gonna add salt to it. But yeah, so we did quite a bit of like the no sodium thing, and then there was this short period at Sky where there was this theory called functional dehydration, which I don't.
I love this.
I mean, I'm sure that it in theory has like a place, but you think about a mountaintop finish in at the Tour de France or something. If you're I'm sure you've done it before. You do a ride, you weigh yourself, you've come back from a ride, you lost 3 liters of water, 3 kilos of water, 6.5 pounds. It's a ton of weight. To lose 6.5 pounds as a skinny world tour rider is like huge as far as like your power to weight ratio.
Yeah.
So they were trying to figure out what the ratio is like to be optimally dehydrated at the end of the final climb of a stage where you would not hinder performance, but that you were lighter to theoretically climb faster. I don't think that really went anywhere, but it was something that they were experimenting with.
It theoretically makes a lot of sense. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just think there's too many factors, and because I've kind of gone the opposite way where like I love sodium in all my sports drinks. Like I consume way more sodium now than ever. Especially now in the summertime. And I think partially being in New England, it's so humid. You just kind of lose salts all the time.
Speaking of funny diets and things that you notice from your teammates, a la low sodium, which seems ironic this day and age. I had a teammate, Elia Viviani, who only ate white foods. And people have heard me say that, but that means he would eat rice, bread, pasta, chicken, on occasion fish, but it would be just the team joke. I dare you to eat a piece of salad. I dare you to eat a single vegetable. Oh, he'd also eat potatoes, white potatoes.
Yeah, I was teammates with Viviani as well at Sky.
You've witnessed this.
Yes, I have. And I think that's kind of like in line with like the low residue diet.
Yeah.
Like there's very little fiber in white foods, maybe cauliflower or something has fiber in his white. But yeah, I think it's like a bland diet. I would just, if I had to be on that diet, I would add ketchup to everything. But
right.
Yeah, I have observed that.
Yeah, eking joy from one's food is, I think, something that's common with most cyclists, but I can't say that Elia had a blast eating. All right, staying on nutrition.
Kind of the ironic side of having a team chef is like if they're cooking, like you don't need a team chef to make bland food. And there was actually an issue we had at Team Skies. We had two different chefs. One came from a Michelin star restaurant. The other one came from like a kind of a food truck in London. And they would make such tasty food that it became a problem. Like you come back from the stage and they've got some like crazy Thai, soup with like, infusion Thai Mexican noodle is like delicious. But it's like, well, you're not really eating for flavor in a race. You're kind of eating for nutrition. So they had to like tone down the flavors just to like make it a little bit more simple.
I love it. So going back to the World Tour days, or even now, what is your favorite food? You go through a feed zone, you grab the musette bag. What is something that you're just like, oh, sweet, it's in there?
Oh boy. That's one thing. I guess my go-to, like if I stop at a general store or something and just like, what can I get pretty much anywhere? Ideally a Rice Krispie treat.
Yes.
And if it's homemade, better. Obviously the ones you can buy that come in the blue wrappers are okay, but they're kind of light, not very dense. But if you can find like a good homemade Rice Krispie treat that's really dense and kind of like oozing with butter when you grab it with your fingers, and it's even better if it's got, I don't know, little mini M&Ms in there or something. That's my go-to. I don't know why, but yeah, that's kind of my ride food if all else is unavailable.
Simple, carbohydrate rich, delicious. You're known for your proclivity for creamies. How often will you have a mid-ride creamie?
Ooh, well, considering most creamies in Vermont are only open seasonally, I'm limited by the months of the year that creamie stands are open, but I would say at least probably once every 5 or 6 rides, I stop at one. And sometimes I'll plan, strategically a route that, stops around halfway to get a creamie. There's one place I think we rode through that I forget, like almost every time I have like an IOU tab there because they only take cash and I never carry cash with me. So at the end of the year, I'll like stop by and pay my tab of summer creamies.
That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect post-ride food. I mean, you got the protein, the carbohydrate, the deliciousness. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of protein mid-ride also. So terrific.
Yeah.
Giving a shout out to a particular creamy stand. What is your favorite creamy stand in Vermont right now?
Ooh, there's one that we stopped at Legendary, I think in Williamstown, just north of Tunbridge. We were going to the Ranger and we stopped there. And that has been the best creamy I've had. I guess creamy stand that's open, regularly.
Yeah.
That was been my go-to that was the best one I've had this year, but the Milk House in St. Johnsbury is kind of my regular stop. Because they're close.
Have you ever had the experience, and not to shout out a particular place, where you have a creamy and it's extraordinary, and then you go back and the idea in your mind is just it's so good, and you go back and it's a letdown?
Yeah, I've had that. I mean, as you know, we've both worked the UnTapped creamy truck. Those machines are temperamental, and depending on how much volume you're doing, like the temperature just outside, like you pull a couple good ones, and then you like go back to pull one, and it's like too hard or too soft or runny. I mean, the consistency is always changing, which I guess also keeps you coming back because you're always seeking that perfect creamy.
Yep. Well said. Spoken like a champ. You are. If we get a maple creamy pull off as you pull the creamy handle, you've got skills, man. So hats off to you for that.
Practice, I guess.
Yeah.
Practice.
All right. Wrapping up here. I'm not kidding when I say that the year was 2016. I was in Calabasas, California. And do you know a kid named Tideman Newman? You don't need to know him.
Sounds really familiar.
He's a very fast cyclist who 2016 was a long time ago. He had a dry chain, and I put a packet of UnTapped on his chain per his recommendation. Water soluble. It resolved the issue, obviously temporarily. We weren't doing a 200-mile ride. So to the answer of what is the strangest place that you've used maple syrup or UnTapped? And now, of course, this could enter a more normal realm of like a maple souffle or a maple rhubarb pie or a maple Rice Krispie. Where's the strangest, most unique place you've used UnTapped?
I wouldn't say it's strange because I do it pretty regularly. But there's a pizza place just across the river in Monroe, New Hampshire that we go to get pizza, and I will bring UnTapped, just the original UnTapped maple gels with me. It's weird to call it a gel when I use it at a pizza restaurant. But growing up in Bend, there was this pizza restaurant that always had honey on the table.
Yeah.
And when I moved to dip your crust in, you think about it, like you eat this amazing pizza and you get to the crust and like, sometimes crust is okay, but it's kind of the worst part of a pizza. But so my revolution to make crust the best part of pizza is I used to dip my crust in honey, but since living in Vermont, if the restaurant has it, I'll ask for a little like saucer of maple syrup. But now I just leave a bunch in my vehicle. So whenever we go get pizza, I bring my little, UnTapped gel, put it on my plate, and then dip my crust into some maple syrup, which is always good. I mean, it's like you kind of get almost like you get a little piece of dessert at the end of every slice of pizza.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Often it's in that situation, it might be spiced or a piquant honey. It has a little bit of heat.
Yeah.
Which could bring up a good poll. We've certainly had the conversation in the UnTapped office. Should we have a spiced maple syrup? And obviously it'd be polarizing. Not everybody likes heat, but man, that would a little bit of get up and go.
Well, I'd put my hand up for testing. Well, who knows? Maybe on the bike it would be okay in the right climate, but I think definitely because I use it all the time. We were just camping this past weekend. We're going camping again this weekend. Like our little camp bag is loaded up with I did use a salted caramel or salted cocoa UnTapped on my waffles this past weekend camping, and it was pretty good.
Yep. No, it's great when camping. Oatmeal, coffee, pancakes, waffles.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a blast. Thank you for joining me on Between Two Maple Trees. May this be a series that we continue. Anyway, Ian, thank you very much for the insight, the conversation, and we'll see you out on the roads.
Thanks, Ted.